Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Team USA Alumni Spotlight. My name is Robbie Fulton, and I am the manager of alumni relations with the USOPC. And today I had the pleasure of sitting down with two-time Paralympic cyclist Greta Neimanas. From 2021 to 2025, Greta served as the vice chair for Team USA Athletes Advisory Council, and now she serves in a role as the elite education coordinator for health professionals for the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. Greta has always been someone that is advocated for her fellow athletes and teammates and continues to do so in the space that she's in. Please enjoy the interview. Hi, Greta. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Robbie. How are you?
Good, good. I really wanted to start this off by giving you your flowers first because we met last year at Assembly for the first time. And ever since then, you have been nothing but appreciative and grateful for what the alumni relations team is doing. And you're always there. Like, if we like, hey, Greta, can you do this? Hey, Greta, can you do that? You're like, yes. And like for this to be a new space of Team USA alumni, it is very appreciative from myself, Christine, and Kara. So I wanted to give you your flowers here early.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate your work.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. To just get us going a little bit, can you just give us a little bit of info of what you're doing now? I think it's always great to start with that, just so that that can help flow the conversation a little bit. So whatever you want to deal with or give us right now, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So definitely, I am currently working with USADA, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. So I am part of their education team. I'm one of their education coordinators. So I spend my time doing education for athletes, obviously,
Hmm.
but also for athlete support personnel. So all those professionals, coaches, team managers, like kind of the greater ecosystem of
Yep.
anti-doping.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
That's so cool. You are a two-time Paralympian. And a lot of the research that we have done and watching some of your other interviews, you've always been outspoken about being introduced to adaptive sports early on in your life. Can you just speak a little bit about that and like how that introduction helped you get to the highest level of sport, and basically catapulted your career?
Yeah, I think my experience with adaptive sports is I think it's still fairly unique within the para athlete space. I grew up with a disability, and I was really lucky. I grew up in the city of Chicago, where there are just a ton of resources for sports of all kinds for kids. But especially through now it's the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, formerly the Rehab Institute of Chicago. And so I grew up honestly like with a pretty similar kind of sporting path, I think, to a lot of non-disabled athletes
Mhm.
that just are active and they're just exposed to different types of sports. I had that opportunity through RIC, through Shirley Ryan, to
Yep.
be active and to be connected to a ton of different sports at a really young age. And then just kind of developed as an athlete and as a kid to then kind of launch me into being able to pursue high level para sport at a more similar age to a lot of non-disabled peers. I think one thing that's really unique, and in some ways, I think for athletes is maybe an obstacle, is that a lot of para athletes acquire a disability later in life, and so if they had an athletic background already, that's going to set them up for success in para sports. But not everybody has years and years of exposure to para sport or adaptive sport of some way, um, to then kind of springboard into the next phase.
Yeah. And can you touch on a little bit like you use the word kid and I felt like it is very intentional to like have that space of like I'm a kid growing up with a disability, but I'm also able to do these other things. Can you just speak to the importance of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, oh gosh, I wish I had the stats off the top of my head, but kids with disabilities are, less active than their non-disabled peers. They have less access to
Hmm.
sports. And so I think that just kind of has almost like a chronic, negative impact on a lot of, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids that don't necessarily have the abilities or like the infrastructure to play with their classmates at recess, to play in the, PE kickball
For
game,
sure.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. And also like my disability, I'm missing my arm. And so it was also, I was privileged in that it was easy for me to jump in and out of sports with disabled kids or with
Mhm.
non-disabled kids. And not everybody has that kind of opportunity to do that. But I mean, I played everything.
Yeah.
I was taking ice skating lessons and soccer and gymnastics and, going like playing t-ball and stuff like that. And just kind of doing what all of my other classmates were doing.
For sure. For sure. No, that's really cool. Can you just talk about where the love of sport came from you for you? Like where did that originate? Like was it a household thing? Like how did that originate?
That is a good question, and I don't have a great answer for it. Like
Okay.
my family was very supportive, and I have a lot of sports fans in my family. My grandma growing up, she was, I mean, anytime we were at her house, like some kind of sports thing was on, whether it was Bulls, the Cubs, any kind of sports, it was going on. And she was a huge sports fan. Same with my uncle. But in terms of actually like playing sports, neither my both of my parents were art teachers.
Okay.
And so I grew up with like a lot of exposure and emphasis on school and education and art. And so kind of being a sports junkie and like like a tiny kid jock was
Yeah.
maybe a little bit out of left field. But I mean, as soon as I started showing any interest, I just like being active and I really loved being outside. I mean, my whole family was totally on board with
Yeah.
whatever I wanted to do.
That's cool. That's cool. Adaptive sport has come so far, and Dr. Roy Cooper, who is on the USOPA executive committee, he's done so many things in the engineering space for wheelchairs and things like that. Like, can you just speak to how far adaptive sports has come and even some of the stuff that you're seeing now?
Yeah, it is. I mean, to say it's come a long way is an understatement, right? And it's because of people like Rory Cooper and Sherry Blowett and Angeli Forber Pratt. I mean, like looking at the equipment, cycling's an equipment intensive sport, wheelchair racing is equipment intensive sport, and just
Mhm.
looking at the technology from 2012, right? Like I feel like a salty, old timer. And I'm like back in my day, which was, 2012 games and 2008 games, like the technology is so much more advanced than it was 15 or 20 years ago. And it's, a lot of experimentation. There's not really a handbook or like, a bike shop really to go to get your hand cycle or to get a racing prosthetic
Mhm.
or a lot of this equipment is really customized, and so it's kind of been built on people tinkering, and
Yeah.
really curious people saying like, okay, well, this is what we've got. It doesn't quite work for me. How can I kind of tweak this or change that to make it better for me? And then somebody else can see that. Oh, that's a great idea. Let me take that to the next step, to the next step, to the next step.
For sure.
Um, and that's been really exciting to watch.
Yeah, yeah. And thinking about that, like what was your first introduction to competing for Team USA like? Like what was that experience like when it was like, okay, this is Team USA and I'm a part of it now?
In terms of like competing, my first competition with Team USA was in 2006. I was selected for the World Championships in 2006.
Hmm.
And that was one of I will say that I probably shouldn't have been there. Like I probably wasn't really ready, but every team has a last person that's selected that's like, yeah, let's bring them along. And so I think I am pretty confident that was me, that it was like, we have a little extra budget. Let's bring Greta. And just like feeling the magnitude of like, okay, I am very clearly the newest person here, the least experienced person here, you know, being on a team roster with folks that I had watched compete in the Paralympics. I, knew about them growing up. I had heard their names before. And then getting to be on the team with them, I was like, oh my God, I'm just like in total awe of
Yeah.
the people that are around me, which was intimidating, but humbling and motivating all at the same time.
And like what when you think about that time, like what of it all, like I mean from the worlds to actually the Paralympics, what stands out most to you about your time with Team USA?
Man, I
And
think
that's a loaded question, I
it
understand.
it is. And I mean it could be answered, I think, in a couple different ways. I think one being the competitions themselves,
Hmm.
right? I mean, as athletes, like that's what you train for. That's what you train to go to the worlds, you train to go to the Paralympic Games.
Yep.
And so some of those big competitions really do stand out. Like my first games in 2008 in Beijing was spectacular.
Hmm.
The games in London were also spectacular, but in a different way. Like it felt more, maybe like a little bit more like a family environment in London compared to like the grandeur and the spectacle of the Beijing Games.
Hmm.
And then I think about the World Championships in 2015. That was my last like major competition that I went to, and feeling like at that point, I felt like I was kind of at the top of my game.
Yeah.
So like very different, looking at the competitions, being at very different phases of my life, like from an age perspective, but then also like as an athlete career perspective, were very different. We still have a group chat. Actually,
Yeah.
like it was just somebody's birthday the other day, and so we're messaging. There's like 10 or 12 of us in this group chat, and we're all former teammates now. Everybody's retired and kind of like in different phases, but it's like, oh hey, happy birthday,
Yeah.
what are you up to? Oh, somebody's nominated for the Hall of Fame, somebody else is starting a podcast, somebody else is doing a business thing. So it's that has been really, really I don't know, I mean, nice is kind of underselling it, but it's
Yeah.
just like really neat to have such good friends come out of that time period of my life.
And I think about like what we were discussing before we hopped on, the ADE team, athlete development and engagement, which alumni relations lives under. We always speak about the life of the athlete as when they first start all the way until they become alumni and through that phase, right? And um, when you look back at your Paralympic experience, is that the same way you view it now as a Team USA alumni? When you were there, were you present? Did you enjoy it? And I know you just kind of hit on like how they were different in Beijing and in London, but like, can you just speak to that a little bit of like how that experience may have changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I was an athlete, I looking back, I feel like I was present in my career. I also will fully acknowledge that I put a tremendous amount of pressure and expectations on myself. Some
Hmm.
of that was real and from, team staff and, expectation. I lived at the training center for a long time.
Yep.
And so I think that also, provided a layer of expectation in like return on investment of being a resident athlete for many years, kind of feeling obligated to deliver on the investment that had been made into me. I do think that I was present. I wish that I was more present
Mm.
at that time. Like looking back, I think I was very focused on results. And again, like as an athlete in your
Yeah.
20s,
Yep.
like it it's understandable. I don't necessarily fault my former self, but looking back, like it, and I guess if this unsolicited advice, right? To like really appreciate all aspects of being an athlete, being at your physical peak, being at your like social and mental and like tactical prowess as an athlete, like
Mm-hmm.
enjoy all of those aspects. And even some of the small things like getting coffee before your competition with your teammates or with your competition. It's like it's okay to be friendly and be friends with athletes from other teams,
Right.
and I think like that now from the outside, it seems like that mentality is more encouraged, I guess. Like
Mm-hmm.
I see it happening. And I think that's really great because thinking about like the lifespan of an athlete, when I was competing, there really was not much of any conversation about like a full lifespan of an athlete as a human being
Yeah.
that then becomes a retired athlete that then maybe gets into coaching or team management or sports science or whatever. Like it was a lot more focused on be an athlete, deliver these results, and then a new athlete will come in. You will retire, and a new athlete will come in and
Yep.
take your place, and then you're just gone. Like
Right.
then you're
Right.
just like in the history logs, right? And now having having conversations about Team USA alumni. I'm privileged to be a USOPA member.
Mm-hmm.
I have teammates who are not Paralympians, right? That like train just as hard, but got sick at an inopportune time or had an injury at an inopportune time, and are not Paralympians or Olympians. And so I think like broadening that to acknowledge all Team USA alumni and like that athletes are still human beings and like
Yes.
your life does not end immediately after your last competition. Like
Right.
we can still be involved in mentors or advisors to athletes in a formal or informal way, or still be part of like the Team USA landscape in some way. So
For sure. And I think you hit it on the head with that, with those comments just about the lifespan of an athlete, but also of a human being, right? And
yeah.
when we talk about that transition piece, it's and I said this with the last guest that we had on, like any transition is tough, right? In any aspect of life, it could be coach to coach, coach to player, player to coach, however you want to slice that up, it can be tough. But can you just speak about your time with Team USA and how did we do a good job of prepping, or did we need some more work in prepping for that transition? Because I think for us, for the ADE team, it's all about that for us. It's we want you to peak and we want you to be the best athlete that you possibly can while you representing us, but also during that transition phase, we want to make sure that you have the tools and resources so that it's seamlessly when you become an alum or retire and go on to that next phase of your life.
To put it, I guess, to put it most simply and succinctly, I was not prepared in any way to retire. Um, of course, conceptually, I knew that eventually I would retire, but I mean, I stopped racing when I was 27.
Hmm.
So in cycling and in so many other endurance sports, like that is just kind of the beginning of like a typical kind of peak or prime for an endurance athlete. So I knew that it would happen, but it was just something that was like, well, I'll do that
Down the
later.
line. Yeah.
I'll prepare for that later. And there really was not. I mean, I mentioned it before, but like there really wasn't any emphasis on life after sport or consideration of life after sport. I mean, there were people in my space that actively discouraged me from going to school because it would distract from training and competing and traveling and things like that. And like, so I think there wasn't really any emphasis. There was no emphasis, let alone like mention of, hey, you should like also have an outside interest that
Yeah.
is just good generally for your mental health and like individual well-being. um that was not happening. So when I was facing retirement, due to injuries and a string of concussions that were just my time was up. My road like kind of ended. No
Mhm.
cycling pun intended, but like that was it. Like all of a sudden, I was no longer Greta the athlete. which is how I had always identified myself up to that point as,
Mhm.
well, I'm Greta, I'm a professional cyclist. And then I wasn't anymore. And so for me personally, like the transition out of sport was incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I had like physical recovery that I was going through. And so in some ways it was kind of nice because it was, I could focus on, okay, heal these bones and do this, physical therapy and do this, my skin is healed. Okay, this is progress. My bone is healed. This is progress. And kind of, was focusing on that for several months. And then it was just like a total emotional, just wave
Yeah.
crush. It's still hard to even like verbalize it or kind of, put words to that. But I mean,
Mhm.
I was a mess
Yeah.
for a while because there was no, I wasn't prepared. Nobody had helped me to prepare. There were some resources available,
Mhm.
but they were like, this was also, in 2015, 2016 was really like the beginning of this conversation about the full athlete lifespan
Yep.
and athletes having a life after sport instead of just kind of falling off a cliff, right? Like into
Yeah.
this pit of despair.
Yeah.
So like there were some programs that were starting, but it was so simple. Now, I mean, it seems like, you know, light years away from what you and the team have built now. But it was like, okay, well, you're not a competing athlete anymore, so go get a job.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you want to get a job, then you need to have a resume. Do you have a resume? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. So it's like, okay, well, but what do I do with this resume? How do I
Right.
transfer skills that I have from being an athlete into like a more traditional resume or work applicable skills? And so it was a wild ride, Robbie. It
Yeah.
took it took a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what we kind of hit on at our last Team USA All Staff was just the simple fact that the USOPC is now putting a real onus on the entire Team USA athlete experience. And it's not just, obviously, we want to get medals, we want to win, we want to be the top in the world, right? But we also want to lead a standard of making sure that we take care of our athletes as well throughout the longevity of their career. But just kind of to transition a little bit and I know like you spent a lot of time with the Team USA AC. If you could just speak a little bit about that as vice chair up until 2025 recently before you took your new role. Can you just speak about like what you guys did over there and how beneficial that is for Team USA athletes as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got involved with, at the time it was the Athletes Advisory Council. Now it's the Team USA Athletes Commission. And I got involved in late 2012 because I was really frustrated with some things that were going on within my sport, like around kind of team selection, and didn't really know what resources were available at that time. Of like, some of these things are not quite, you know, going perfectly, let's say.
Yeah.
And got involved, was like, okay, well, I don't know what the AAC is, but if it's a place where we can work together to make things better for athletes, then okay, fine, I'll go to a meeting.
Yeah.
And so I ran, I was elected, and so I started with the AAC in 2013 as a sport specific representative, alternate representative, and very quickly came to really like that work. Of just trying to make things a little bit better for athletes coming behind me.
Hmm.
And I was still competing. I did not have any, plans to retire at that time in 2013. But very quickly learned that like, despite having very different sports and different sport experiences, Team USA athletes, whether you're a cyclist or a wrestler or a water polo player, like there's so much more in common
Yeah.
um, than like your final like work job,
Yeah.
right? Of
Right.
like, well, we do, very similar training, like the mindset's so similar. Um, but through my time there as, sport rep, then on leadership, I served very briefly as like an interim chair. I was vice chair. I was on the leadership team. And we, I guess I got to see that body grow from kind of a box check of, here's like compliance under the Ted Stevens Act, and this group exists, and we have a meeting 2 or 3 times a year, maybe in person. We get together, and it's, a nice time to talk about our sports and what we have in common, and what's going well and what's going poorly. To far more consistent, in some ways, actually, COVID was really good. We adopted online meetings, monthly meetings, in addition to in-person kind of like forums and summits. But we were very heavily involved with the Council for Racial and Social Justice. That was about an 18 or 19-month long project, with stakeholders, athletes and GPs, outside experts, to look at like what is happening in sports, and how can athletes and the USOPC support athletes in being full human beings,
Yeah.
with concerns, and as humans, and protecting our rights as humans,
Yeah.
and athletes too. So that was really exciting. We also worked really hard to formalize kind of our structure, grow, having our leadership team, which had been in existence for a long time, but actually trying to make it more robust. So one of the things that we worked on was, with the members of the leadership team, having kind of an area of expertise. So each, member of leadership had, it was like commercial rights. Okay. Athlete safety, and well-being, anti-doping, Paralympic sports. And so kind of honing people, the members of the AC, into their areas of interest and areas of expertise, to almost be like task forces.
Sure.
And that was really neat. And I mean, the momentum is still growing, it's building. The AC just hired a new executive director. I mean, I'm really excited, happy to, have been part of it, and
Yeah.
then really excited to see.
Thinking about that and what the AC really means to just athletes in general, but also I think when we talk about professionalism, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit of how much that helped you grow in a professional sense of working and outside of actually being the athlete, and being a professional now that is representing athletes, that are talking on behalf of athletes. When we talk about that, and we just put out our Team USA career platform, that helps Team USA athletes get jobs, and another centralized place for them to connect with Team USA alumni so that they can get mentorship. Can you just speak a little bit about how important mentorship is, especially in this space, right? Where we talk about the life of an athlete, and the athlete is so focused at that moment of being the top of the top and hitting the peak of, now I need to transition, and like you said, it's coming at some point. It's inevitable. But
Yep.
like how that can help bridge that gap of having a mentor.
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit cliched, but you don't know what you don't know. And so having somebody who has been through career transition, who has worked in a professional setting, or who has gone to college or back to school after a break, like having somebody who's been through that, who's lived that, and then can say, "Hey, Robbie, you're going through this transition right now. I have been exactly where you are,
Yeah.
and I made it through. Here's what I did that worked. Here's what I did that didn't work." I think is really, really important. And I think looking for an athlete, right, to like look for opportunities, either to seek out mentorship or to seek out new experiences, whether it is a formal mentor mentee partnership, or just kind of dabbling in a bunch of different experiences, I think is really, really important for making that next step from being an athlete to a retired athlete and an alumni, Team USA alumni member, um, because you are going to retire at some point.
Yeah.
And, again, like you don't know what you might like to do besides
Mhm.
that. When I was racing, the only thing in my life that I wanted to do was race my bike.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, well, that was a fun time, and now I'd rather do something else,
Right.
right? But like, you have to have at least the exposure or somebody to say like, Robbie, let's try this thing. Like, I think your skills would be really good in this group, right?
Mhm.
You would be a great athlete representative, or you would be great on this task force because of A, B, and C skills that you've developed or honed through being an athlete. You can apply those things here.
Yep, I agree. I agree. And now when we talk about, you being, and you kind of hit on like the expansion, right, of Team USA alumni now because you had teammates who didn't become Paralympians, but they were Team USA athletes. Can you just speak about like the inaugural class, right, of Team USA alumni, you being a part of it and what that recognition means?
Yeah, I think um I don't yeah, I think that it's maybe long overdue without, and I don't want to like put anybody on blast here, but
Yeah.
I feel like so much emphasis in the past was always on only on USOPA. And it's not to detract or take away any flowers from USOPA members. I am privileged to be a USOPA member.
Hmm.
But I think it's an evolution that kind of goes hand in hand with the ADE and what the USOPC is doing, and like acknowledging that there's more to life, there's more to sports, there's more to athletes than only going to a certain competition, right?
Yeah.
Only getting like you only count if you get to the Olympics or the Paralympics. Well, no, also
Right.
like the world championships are incredibly important, right? And
Yeah,
like and
yeah.
the Pan Am Games are like incredibly important. And so I think now having, Team USA alumni more broadly and acknowledging, like really embracing the, formerly like 10 plus
Hmm.
athletes,
Yeah.
um, is really, it's really nice. It feels really validating for me now to be a part of this group, in a different capacity, and bring more people in along the way as well that have been here, that have worked super hard, and we can just kind of grow the table, right?
Hmm.
Pull up another chair. There's room for everybody.
Yeah, and I want to just hit on that last point that you made about just it's room for everyone, and that is literally what the alumni relations team and even the backing of Kerry White, our vice president of the ADE team, is always talking about is that shared experience, and we think that that's so important. So, can you just hit on that a little bit more about that shared experience that you all have that you can bring together, even if that athlete didn't make an Olympic or Paralympic games, like that shared experience is so important.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating when you're in it, but now being retired and being out of sport, I think it's really a privilege to be a US athlete, because in a lot of ways, like, I mean, one, go Team USA, right? But like thinking about all of the work and all of the people that are involved with getting realistically a very small number of athletes to the Paralympics or the Olympics. Like, we we are really privileged in that our bench is super deep, right?
Yeah,
And so like our final roster may only be 10 or 12 athletes that go to the games for a given sport, but there are 50 other athletes that helped those 10 athletes get to that level, right? Like all of the people that you train with, all the people that you compete against in, at nationals, at regional championships, that are your training partners, at the training center, that are part of those 10 athletes success,
hmm,
right, like there are so many. I know we talk about the team behind the team, and most frequently I think refer to staff members, like the team staff
yeah,
members as the team behind the team. But more broadly, like the athletes that didn't make that final roster are also part of that team behind the team,
for sure.
that aren't wearing the polo, in the team picture, but were equally important in an athlete getting to the start line at the games.
For sure.
So
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more with you. And my last final question for you. Any suggestions for either the ADE team or the alumni relations team to help kind of just mine this thing together, right? And put it all together for the entirety of an athlete experience because I think that is the only thing. Like we met last week. And that is the only thing we care about is the entirety of that athlete, Team USA athlete experience.
yeah, putting
And
me
I
on the
know
spot.
yeah, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but we're open to it because you've lived through it, right? And who better than to tell us than an athlete who's been through it to say like, hey, I think this could be more, or if we're doing a really good job, we'll take the praise, Greta. We'll take it.
And I have said it for a long time. Like I've said it a bunch before. And I'm sure that I've said it to you, but I will say it again in that it is the best time ever to be a Team USA athlete.
Yeah.
Like with the resources and the programs that are available, tuition assistance, the partnership with Dartmouth and Tuck Next Step. I mean, that was a huge benefit that I took advantage of myself, and tuition assistance. And so I think keep doing what you're doing. Definitely, like I wish that I had done this when I was an athlete, but like take the time to really acknowledge and feel the success of what you and the team are building to support athletes. Um,
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate
yes,
that. That suffice everything that we needed.
yeah, I
But you did bring up some of the resources that you took advantage of. Can you just talk about those a little bit before we hop off? Just so that the viewers and even if some of the Team USA athletes stumble upon our video and they're like, "Oh, Greta did that, so I should do it too." So, can you just speak about those a little bit?
definitely, and I mentioned it back at the beginning that there were people in like kind of in my sphere that were not encouraging of me going to school, to say the least. And so I think definitely take advantage of the tuition assistance programs and the free courses that are available, because that transition is coming. And like it or not, believe it or not, like I growing up, despite having two both parents that were teachers, felt like, oh, well, it's just kind of a piece of paper. But that degree really does mean a lot, and it does open a lot of doors. Um, Now, especially with online classes and asynchronous learning, like it is easier than ever to be an athlete and a student at the same time. I know so many athletes come through the NCAA system. So whether that's your path or you're a non-traditional student like I was, take advantage of the tuition assistance and the free courses available. Um, I went through the Tuck program, the next step transition to business program through Tuck's business school at Dartmouth. And that was phenomenal. At the time, it was 2 weeks in person. It was pre-COVID. And so it was 2 weeks in person. But take advantage of that. The people that you meet, it's a kind of a combo program of elite athletes retiring and military members, primarily like a lot of special operators transitioning out of the military. And so there's a ton of similarity in mentality, identity, transition, all of those things. It was a phenomenal program. Can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah.
So those were the two biggest that I took advantage of.
Great, great. I love it. Well, I appreciate your time, Greta. And I know the whole ADE is saying the same thing once they watch this. So, thank you and much more success your way coming. And I appreciate it.
Thanks, Robbie.